The airport buzzed with travelers rushing between gates. Under the bright lights, a woman in a red coat was holding the hands of two little girls. To anyone else, they looked like a family. But there was stiffness in the children's movements, the way their shoulders hunched, as if weighed down by fear. The older one in the yellow jacket clutched her small sister's hand too tightly, her eyes fixed on the ground. Trailing just a step behind was another girl, no older than 10, dressed in a red dress. Her steps slowed. She glanced over her shoulder, not at the crowds, not at the glowing departure screens, but at the uniformed police officer kneeling beside his German Shepherd K9. Her heart pounded, but she didn't dare speak. The woman had warned them, one sound, and there would be consequences. So instead, the girl stretched out her hand and pressed her palm gently against the woman's back. A signal, silent, desperate. The officer didn't notice. He was scanning the terminal, distracted by the flood of travelers. But the dog's ears flicked up, its eyes sharpened. The animal froze, muscles tightening, as if it had understood a message no one else could hear. The girl held her palm steady, praying the signal would be enough. The woman in red turned slightly, suspicion flaring in her gaze. "Keep walking," she hissed under her breath, squeezing the children's wrists harder. The girl quickly dropped her hand and lowered her head. But the dog didn't look away. It rose to its feet, staring at the trio with unblinking focus. Its handler frowned and tugged the leash gently. "What is it, boy?" The German Shepherd didn't move. Its body stiffened, every line of muscle pointing toward the woman in red and the frightened children. The crowd flowed around them, oblivious. But in that moment, the dog and the little girl had locked onto each other, one silently pleading for help, the other silently answering. And the woman had no idea. The German Shepherd's body trembled with focus, its sharp eyes never leaving the woman in the red coat. A low rumble vibrated in its throat, too soft for the crowd to hear, but enough to make its handler glance down in surprise. "What's gotten into you?" the officer muttered, pulling gently on the leash. The dog resisted, straining forward. Its nails scraped against the floor as it inched toward the trio. The woman tightened her grip on the girls. "Faster," she whispered harshly, dragging them toward the gate. The younger child stumbled, nearly falling, but the woman yanked her upright, without slowing. Her eyes flicked back once, catching sight of the police officer and the restless dog. For a split second, her smile tightened into something colder. The girl in the red dress risked another glance behind her. This time, she didn't lift her hand. Instead, she locked eyes with the dog, silently begging it not to give up. And the dog didn't. With a sharp bark, it lunged forward, pulling the leash so hard that the officer staggered. Heads turned. Travelers paused, startled by the sudden noise. "Easy, boy," the officer hissed, trying to hold the animal back. But the shepherd barked again, louder this time, its ears flat, its entire frame rigid with alarm. The woman's face paled. She quickened her pace, weaving through the crowd. "Don't look back," she hissed at the children, her voice tight. Passengers began to murmur, glancing between the barking dog and the woman dragging the girls. Some frowned, uneasy, but no one stepped in. The scene looked odd, suspicious even. But who wanted to interfere in someone else's family business? The officer's heart pounded. His K9 was trained to detect danger, trained never to act without reason. He tightened his grip on the leash, eyes narrowing on the fleeing trio. Something wasn't right. The dog barked again, straining so hard that the officer had no choice. "All right, boy," he muttered, straightening. "Let's check it out." With that, he allowed the shepherd to lead him into the crowd, straight toward the woman in the red coat and the three children she was so desperate to keep under control. And for the first time, the predator realized she was being hunted. The crowd thickened near the boarding gates, a blur of rolling suitcases and chatter. Yet the German shepherd moved with purpose, weaving between travelers, dragging its handler closer with every stride. The officer followed reluctantly at first, but now his focus sharpened. His dog wasn't acting on impulse, it was tracking something. He scanned the trio ahead, the woman in red and the children at her side. Something about the girl in the red dress caught his eye. She turned her head ever so slightly, not toward him, but toward the dog. Her hand lifted, pressing flat against the woman's back for only a moment before dropping again, subtle. Quiet, almost invisible, but it wasn't random. It was a signal. The officer's breath hitched. His instinct screamed. He glanced at his dog, who was already locked in, tail rigid, ears up. The shepherd had understood too. "Ma'am, excuse me," the officer called out, his voice rising above the noise of the terminal. The woman stiffened. Without turning, she tightened her grip on the children and pushed forward faster. The younger one whimpered, but didn't dare cry out. Passengers began to notice. A mother frowned, pulling her own child closer. A man lowered his newspaper, watching the woman drag the little girls. Whispers spread through the crowd, tension thickening like smoke. The shepherd barked sharply, lunging so hard that the leash slipped from the officer's grasp. Gasps erupted as the dog bounded ahead, swift and precise, weaving through startled travelers. The woman whipped her head around just in time to see the animal closing in. Panic flashed across her face. She yanked the children toward the jet bridge, her steps frantic now. But the little girl in red no longer looked afraid. She held her ground for a heartbeat, letting the dog see her eyes again. Then she mouthed a single word: help. The shepherd's bark echoed like thunder through the terminal, and this time the officer was running right behind him. The woman shoved through the crowd, dragging the two little girls toward the jet bridge. Her red coat flared like a warning flag, easy to track even among the flood of passengers. But the airport was no longer her cover. It had turned into a stage. Too many eyes were watching now. The German shepherd cut through the throng like a bullet, passengers leaping aside at its sparks. The officer sprinted after it, his radio bouncing at his side, one hand outstretched. "Move! Police! Make way!" The children stumbled again. The smaller girl whimpered, her voice cracking. The woman yanked her upright with a violent jerk. "Quiet!" she hissed, her mask of composure breaking. That was the moment the girl in red acted. She twisted suddenly, wrenching her hand free. Instead of running, she spun toward the dog, barreling closer, and raised her arm high. It wasn't a scream. It wasn't a cry. Just a sharp, deliberate point, straight at the woman's back. The shepherd exploded forward with a thunderous bark. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones rose into the air, recording. The woman froze for half a second, caught off guard by the roar of attention. Her eyes darted wildly. Too many witnesses now. Escape was slipping through her fingers. She bolted anyway. But the shepherd was faster. It leapt ahead, not to bite, not to attack, but to cut her off. Skidding across the polished floor, it planted itself in her path, barking so furiously the sound rattled glass. The woman reeled back, almost losing her balance. The officer lunged forward, seizing her arm with iron force. "Enough! Let them go!" She thrashed, clawing to break free, her eyes burning with a cornered animal's rage. The girls cried out, stumbling away as the crowd parted to shield them. The officer shoved the woman against the wall, snapping cold steel around her wrists. The shepherd stood guard, teeth bared, growl vibrating through the floor. The woman's defiance cracked. "You don't understand, Sam," she spat, but the words fell flat under the weight of dozens of watching eyes and the unrelenting bark of the dog. The little girl in red stepped closer, her tiny chest heaving, and for the first time, her voice carried clear across the terminal. "She's not our mother." Silence crashed over the scene, and in that silence, the truth became undeniable. The woman's struggles weakened as the officer forced her down into a seat, the handcuffs biting against her wrists. The crowd pressed closer, their whispers a rising tide. Some filmed, others simply stared, but all eyes were fixed on the red coat, the predator unmasked. The little girl in red ran to the officer, tugging at his sleeve. Her eyes were wet, but her voice carried steel. "I gave the signal, your dog." He understood. The officer knelt, his face softening as he looked between her and the German shepherd, whose tail now thumped firmly against the ground, mission complete. "You were brave, Widdy," he said, his voice low, braver than most adults would ever be. Airport security stormed in, taking the woman into custody. She spat curses, thrashing like a storm until she was dragged away. Her final words echoed down the terminal, "This isn't over." But no one believed her anymore. She was no longer in control. The two younger girls clung to the girl in red, burying their faces against her. For the first time, they didn't look afraid. They looked safe. The crowd broke into scattered applause, relief cutting through the tension like sunlight breaking through clouds. The officer stood, one hand resting proudly on the shepherd's back. He lifted his radio. "Suspect detained. Children safe." His voice carried calm finality, the sound of order restored. A woman from the crowd stepped forward, kneeling before the three children with open arms. She was airport staff, her face gentle. "Come with me, sweethearts. You're safe now." The girls hesitated, then slowly reached for her hand. The officer looked once more at the girl in red. She hadn't let go of her courage, even when no one noticed. He gave her a small nod, one only she would truly understand. She nodded back, then turned to the dog. "Thank you," she whispered. The shepherd responded with a quiet bark, its ears flicking as if it understood every word. As the terminal began to return to normal, the story of what had happened spread in hushed tones. Not about the woman, not about her failed escape, but about a little girl who had the courage to signal, and a dog who had the instinct to listen. For in that airport, among hundreds of strangers, a truth became clear. Sometimes the smallest voice and the sharpest instincts can save lives. If this moment inspired you, show some love with a like and subscribe to be part of the next story.